Hi, I'm Chef Bonnie Friesen from Fospa & Company Catering, and today I'm going to show you how to make duck confit using duck legs from Fraser Valley Specialty Poultry. So duck confit is a classical preservation method that originated in Gascony, France, that people would use to store their duck during the winter months. Today I'm going to show you the 2 steps involved in making duck confit, and what results is just a delicious, luxurious meat that is really versatile. You can use it in appetizers, salads, or main courses. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do is cure the duck using a salt, sugar cure with some really beautiful aromatic spices and herbs. So typically all that you need for this cure is the salt, but the aromatics and spices are going to give you that really flavorful duck in the end. So what I'm putting into my salt cure today is some really nice sea salt, brown sugar. We're going to put in some black peppercorns, bay leaves, cloves, and some cinnamon sticks. And you can play around with this as much as you like using juniper, allspice. Those are really nice options as well. And the other thing I'm going to add is just some fresh thyme. So the main thing that you want to remember when curing your duck is you want about a tablespoon of salt per duck leg. So I'm going to just sprinkle about 1.5 teaspoons on each side of the duck. And in this step, you really just want to rub that in. Massage it right into the skin side and also on the flesh. Then after that, I'm just going to add about 1 teaspoon of brown sugar, and the same thing, I'm just going to rub it in. The sugar just really helps to balance the salt and all the flavors out of it. I find that using sugar really brings out a lot of the natural flavors when you're cooking. So on the flesh side, we're going to just add a couple peppercorns. Going to add a bay leaf to each side. Going to do a few cloves and a cinnamon stick. And then the last step is I'm just going to add some thyme sprigs. You want to cure the duck legs anywhere from 24 hours to 36 hours. And it's just really important to make sure they get at least 24 hours because it's going to hugely increase the shelf life of the duck in the end once we actually store it in the fat. At that point, you could store the duck in a fridge for up to 6 months if it's stored properly. So just really important, that first step. So I'm just going to wrap the duck and leave it in the fridge for about a day. So today I'm going to serve the duck confit with some red wine braised cabbage with apples and honey. And this is a really lovely fall dish, really hearty, and pairs really nicely with the duck. So what I'm going to put into this is some red cabbage that I'm just going to slice really thinly, as thin as possible here, but we're going to braise this down for about 2 hours. So it's going to break down even if you can't get it quite thin enough. I'm also going to put just some yellow onion into this. I'm just going to start a pan on low heat. just a medium-sized saucepan that comes with a lid. And I'm just going to put in a couple tablespoons of butter. So I'm just melting down the butter, and I'm going to add the onion just for a couple minutes, just to break that down. And then I'm going to add the cabbage, and we're going to let that cook out for about 15 minutes before adding the red wine. And just give it a really good stir to make sure it's coated well with the butter. So once the cabbage is cooked out a little bit with the onions and the butter, I'm going to add about half a cup of a dry red wine. What would be really nice here is a Pinot Noir that pairs really well with duck. I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of white wine vinegar, just for a bit of acidity. About 2 tablespoons of honey. And then just some sea salt and fresh cracked pepper. And then the last thing I'm going to add, just for a little bit more sweetness, is some apple. I'm just going to grate this really fine and stir it right into my cabbage. Okay, so give that one last stir, and then we're going to just cover the pot and let it stew for about 2 hours on low heat. It's smelling really good already. So now we're going to cook the duck in its own fat for about 6 hours. I'm just going to preheat the oven to 250 degrees. And while that's preheating, I'm just going to rinse the duck and pat it dry on some paper towel. So I'm going to cook the duck legs in the traditional confit method using duck fat. Duck fat is actually a really versatile fat to use that people often don't know about. But anywhere that you're using butter or lard, you can use duck fat in its place. It's really great for roasting potatoes. I use it sometimes for even scrambling eggs. It's just a really luxurious fat to use. You can get it at the Fraser Valley Duck and Goose Farm Store if you can't find it. Lep Farms also sells it. And alternatively, if you just don't have any around, you can also use olive oil in its place. The only thing with using olive oil is that the duck won't last as long as if it's preserved in its actual fat. So I'm just going to put it in an oven-proof pan here. And just cover it with the duck fat. As duck fat cools, it goes solid, and as you heat it, it becomes just a really clear, beautiful fat. So I want to make sure that my duck legs are really submerged in the fat. Okay, that looks good. I'm just gonna put this on the stove top. So you really wanna use a pan that can go in the oven and also on your stove top. Just to bring the fat up to temperature, and then we're gonna cover it with some foil and slide it into our preheated oven. Okay, so it's been about 6 hours. I'm gonna pull our duck legs out of the oven and see how they look. Let's take a peek. It smells absolutely fantastic. I'm smelling the cinnamon and the cloves, and just that really rich duck as well. Oh, that looks so beautiful. So what we're looking for here is for the duck meat to slowly kind of retract from the leg bone, and that's kind of how you know that it's done. So I'm gonna serve this right away. But you could also keep this by letting it cool in its fat at room temperature. Until the fat kind of goes solid again. And at that point, you can store it right in the refrigerator. And because we've cured this for 24 hours and we've cooked it at that low temperature for about 6 hours, your duck legs are gonna stay preserved if you cover it in the fat for a number of weeks, anywhere up to 3 months. And so there's just a few key points that are really important to remember with that. The fat is gonna keep all the oxygen and light from getting to the duck, all those things that are gonna make, that would make it spoil sooner. So if you do this properly, you can have this in your fridge and it's just ready to pull out on any occasion. And it's just a really beautiful thing to pull out as an appetizer, to shred the meat over a really nice salad, or to serve as an entree. So before I plate this up, I'm just gonna give the skin a really good crispy sear. It'll be beautiful, golden brown. The flesh will just be melting off the bone, and we're gonna serve it over our cabbage that has just been braising for about 2 hours now, so it should be ready to go. So I'm just using a heavy bottomed cast iron pan, but you could use a steel pan as well, whatever works best for you. And I'm just gonna turn this on a high heat. And the great thing about duck is you don't need to use any extra fats like oils or butter. You can just use the duck fat. I'm just gonna put a nice ladle in the bottom of the pan to coat it. And I'm just gonna bring that up to a high temperature, and we're gonna sear the duck legs until they're golden brown. Okay, so our duck fat has just come up to a high heat. I'm gonna add in our duck legs. And those will just take a couple minutes for the skin to get crispy. Okay, so that's looking really beautiful. Skin is crisping up perfectly. Duck skin has so much fat in it, but once you harness it correctly, it's just really delicious. Okay, so this cabbage is smelling so good. I think it's gonna complement the flavors of the duck perfectly. Just gonna give it a quick taste. So good, just melts in your mouth. Just gonna add a little bit more sea salt and just a little bit of scallion to brighten it up. Okay, let's throw that in there and then we're ready to plate it up. Okay, so I'm just going to use this beautiful cabbage as the bed for the duck. Just pile it nice and high. I'm going to sit the duck legs right on top of that. So just a few simple steps, and here we have our beautiful crispy duck confit over red wine braised cabbage with apples. I really hope that you give it a try at home. You won't be disappointed. Thanks for joining me.